The gunshot that killed her father echoed through the dusty streets of Bonanza, Nevada, and Hannah Davison knew in that terrible moment that her life had changed forever. She stood frozen outside the general store, watching as two men rode away laughing, leaving her father's body crumpled in the dirt like a discarded rag. It was June of 1878, and the desert sun beat down mercilessly as Hannah fell to her knees beside him, her dress soaking up his blood as she cradled his head in her lap. He was already gone, his eyes staring sightlessly at the harsh blue sky above. The marshal would later tell her it was a dispute over a card game, as if that made any difference, as if that gave meaning to the senseless violence that had just stolen the only family she had left in this world. The funeral was small and quick, attended by only a handful of townsfolk who barely knew her father. Hannah stood alone by the grave, clutching a handkerchief that had belonged to her mother, dead these past 5 years from fever. At 20 years old, she found herself completely alone with no money, no prospects, and no skills that would help her survive in this harsh landscape. Her father had been a gambler and a dreamer, always chasing the next big strike, the next fortune that would change their lives. He had dragged her across half the West, never staying anywhere long enough for her to learn a trade or make lasting connections. She could read and write, which was more than many could say, but that would not put food in her belly or a roof over her head. The boarding house where they had been staying gave her 3 days to vacate the room. The landlady was not unkind, but business was business, and Hannah had no way to pay the rent. She spent those 3 days sorting through her father's meager possessions, finding nothing of value except his old pocket watch, which she kept for sentimental reasons, and his worn Bible, which she had never seen him open. On the morning of the 4th day, she packed her few belongings into a carpet bag and stepped out into the street, squinting against the bright Nevada sun, with nowhere to go and no plan for her future. Bonanza was a small mining town that had sprung up a few years earlier, when silver was discovered in the nearby hills. The main street was lined with the usual establishments: saloons, gambling halls, a general store, a blacksmith, and the assay office where miners brought their ore. Hannah walked slowly down the dusty thoroughfare, trying to gather her courage to ask for work. She had no experience as a cook, no skills as a seamstress beyond mending her own clothes, and no references that would recommend her for any respectable position. She tried the general store first. The owner, a portly man with a thick mustache, looked her up and down and shook his head before she even finished explaining her situation. The seamstress already had an apprentice. The doctor's wife, who sometimes hired help, had just taken on a new girl the week before. By noon, Hannah had been turned away from every establishment in town. Her stomach growled with hunger, reminding her that she had eaten nothing that morning, trying to stretch her last few coins as far as possible. Defeated, she sat down on the bench outside the Wells Fargo office and let the tears come. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that she had been holding back since her father's death. Everything felt hopeless and overwhelming. She had no skills, no family, no future. The West was no place for a woman alone, and she knew that her options were quickly narrowing to the sort of work that would destroy what was left of her dignity. "Miss, are you all right?" The voice was deep and gentle, with a warmth that made Hannah look up through her tears. Standing before her was a tall man in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and kind brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat, and he held the reins of 2 horses, both laden with supplies. His face showed genuine concern, and something about his presence made her feel safer than she had felt in days. "I apologize," Hannah said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I did not mean to make a spectacle of myself." "No apology needed," he said, his voice soft. "But you look like you are carrying the weight of the world. Is there anything I can do to help?" Something about his kindness broke down the last of Hannah's defenses. The words came pouring out before she could stop them. The whole sorry tale of her father's death, her lack of skills, her desperate need for work, any work, that would allow her to survive. She told him about being turned away from every place in town, about having nowhere to sleep that night, about feeling completely and utterly lost. "I have no skills," she sobbed, fresh tears streaming down her face. "I cannot cook properly, I cannot sew well, I have no experience with anything useful. I am completely worthless." The man was quiet for a moment, then he knelt down so he was at eye level with her, his expression serious but kind. "You have a heart," he said firmly. "That's all I need." Hannah blinked at him through her tears, not understanding. "What?" "I am Henry Jameson. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. It is not much, just me and a couple of hands trying to make a go of raising cattle. My wife died 2 years ago in childbirth, along with our baby. Since then, the house has been nothing but a place to sleep. The hands and I eat whatever we can throw together, which is mostly beans and tough meat. The place is falling apart because none of us have time to tend to it properly. I have been thinking about hiring someone to help with the household, but I have been putting it off because I do not trust easily." He paused, his brown eyes searching her face. "But I can see you are a good person in a bad situation. You have an honest face, and more than that, you have heart. That matters more to me than whether you can bake a perfect pie. Skills can be learned, character cannot. If you are willing to work hard and learn, I will give you a job, room and board plus $20 a month. You will have your own room in the house, and I give you my word that you will be treated with complete respect. I am offering you honest work, nothing more and nothing less." Hannah stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "You would hire me, just like that? You know nothing about me." "I know you are alone and desperate, and that you are honest enough to admit when you do not know how to do something," Henry said. "I know you loved your father enough to cry for him. I know you have been through hell and are still trying to stand on your own 2 feet. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." "But I truly cannot cook well," Hannah said, wanting to be completely honest. "I have never run a household. I will probably make terrible mistakes." "Then you will learn from them," Henry said simply. "My standards are not high, Miss Davison. Anything will be better than what we have now. And I am a patient man. What do you say? Will you take the job?" Hannah felt as though she had been drowning and someone had just thrown her a rope. She nodded quickly, afraid he might change his mind. "Yes. Yes, thank you. I will work as hard as I can, I promise." Henry stood and extended his hand to help her up. His grip was strong and calloused, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living. "Then let us get your things and head out to the ranch. We should arrive before dark if we leave now." Hannah retrieved her carpet bag from the boarding house, still hardly believing her luck. Henry helped her mount one of the horses, a gentle mare with kind eyes, and they set out northward from Bonanza. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all sagebrush and red rock under the enormous sky. Henry rode beside her, occasionally pointing out landmarks and telling her about the ranch. "The Triple J Ranch," he said. "Named it after my father, Jonathan Jameson. He started the place 20 years ago when this was still wild country. He and my mother built it from nothing. They both died of fever when I was 22, left me the ranch and everything on it. I have been trying to honor their memory by keeping it going, but it has been hard, especially after I lost Mary." "Your wife?" Hannah asked gently. Henry nodded, his jaw tightening. She was everything to me. Sweetest girl you ever met, with a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. When she got pregnant, we were so happy. We had so many plans, but the birth went wrong and there was nothing the doctor could do. Lost them both in one terrible night. I am so sorry, Hannah said, and meant it. She knew the pain of loss all too well. It has been 2 years, Henry said. The hurt is not as sharp as it was, but the loneliness is still there. The house feels empty without her. I suppose that is why I have let it go. Hard to care about curtains and clean floors when the person you were keeping them nice for is gone. They rode in companionable silence for a while. Hannah found herself studying Henry from the corner of her eye. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and the kind of solid build that came from years of hard physical labor. But more than his appearance, it was his kindness that struck her. He had offered her help when she desperately needed it, asking nothing in return but honest work. In her experience, that sort of decency was rare, especially toward a woman alone. The ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. It was not large, but it had good bones. The main house was a sturdy wooden structure with a wide porch, though Hannah could see even from a distance that it needed repairs. The paint was peeling, and one of the shutters hung at an odd angle. Behind the house was a barn, a corral with about 20 head of cattle, and a smaller bunkhouse where she assumed the ranch hands lived. 2 men emerged from the barn as they rode up. One was older, maybe 50, with silver threading through his dark hair and a weather-beaten face. The other was younger, probably close to Hannah's age, with bright red hair and a smattering of freckles across his nose. "Henry, you are back," the older man said, then noticed Hannah. "And you have brought company." "This is Miss Hannah Davison," Henry said, helping her down from the horse. "She will be helping with the household. Hannah, this is Tom Rigsby, my foreman, and the youngster there is Billy Patterson. They are good men and they will treat you with respect." Tom tipped his hat to Hannah. "Pleasure to meet you, miss. Welcome to the Triple J." Billy just stared at her with wide eyes, his face turning nearly as red as his hair. "Madam," he managed to squeak out. Henry showed Hannah into the house, and she tried not to let her dismay show on her face. The inside was even worse than the outside. Dust covered every surface, dirty dishes were piled in the kitchen, and the floor looked like it had not been swept in months. The furniture was nice enough, clearly made with care, but everything was neglected and sad. It was the home of men who had given up on making a place feel like a home. "I know it is bad," Henry said, sounding almost apologetic. "Like I said, we have just been surviving, not really living. Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. It was the guest room. I cleaned it out last month, so it should be better than the rest of the house." He led her upstairs, and Hannah was relieved to see that the room was indeed cleaner than what she had seen so far. It was small but cheerful, with a window that looked out over the ranch yard. There was a bed with a quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. It was simple, but it was more than she had dared hope for. "Take some time to settle in," Henry said. "We already ate, such as it was, so do not worry about cooking tonight. Tomorrow will be soon enough to start. For now, just rest. I am sure you have had a difficult few days." After he left, Hannah sat on the edge of the bed and let out a long breath. She had a job. She had a place to sleep. She was safe, at least for now. The relief was so overwhelming that she felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than despair. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her other dress in the small wardrobe and placing her mother's handkerchief and her father's pocket watch on the dresser where she could see them. That night, she lay in the unfamiliar bed and listened to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. Horses nickered in the barn, cattle lowed in the distance, and somewhere an owl hooted. It was so different from the noise of town, the constant din of saloons and arguments and wagon wheels on dirt roads. Here, there was space and quiet, and despite everything, Hannah felt a small spark of hope kindle in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she could make a life here. She woke at dawn the next morning, determined to prove her worth. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs to the kitchen, surveying the disaster with fresh eyes. The first thing to do was clean. She could not possibly cook in such filth. She found a pump outside the back door and began hauling water, heating it on the stove, and scrubbing every surface she could reach. It took her most of the morning just to clear away the worst of the grime and wash the accumulated dishes. Henry came in around mid-morning, his eyebrows rising when he saw the transformation. "You have been busy." "I have barely started," Hannah said, pushing a strand of hair out of her face. "But I cannot work in such conditions. I hope you do not mind that I have been using the water and soap freely." "Mind? I am amazed. The place has not looked this good in 2 years." He grabbed a cup and poured himself coffee from the pot she had managed to make. He took a sip and made a surprised sound. "This is good. Coffee I can make," Hannah admitted. "My father liked his coffee strong, so I learned that much at least." Henry smiled, and Hannah noticed how it changed his whole face, making him look younger and less careworn. "Well, that alone makes you valuable around here. Tom's coffee tastes like boot leather." By afternoon, Hannah had the kitchen clean enough to attempt cooking. She found flour, lard, and some dried beef in the pantry, along with a few sad-looking potatoes. She had watched other women cook often enough, even if she had never done much of it herself. How hard could biscuits be? She mixed flour and lard and water, formed them into rough shapes, and put them in the oven. Then she fried up the beef and boiled the potatoes with some wild onions she found growing near the pump. When the men came in for supper, she served the meal with trepidation. The biscuits were definitely burnt on the bottom, and the beef was tougher than she would have liked, but it was hot and it was food. She held her breath as Henry took the first bite. He chewed slowly, then swallowed. "It is good," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "Better than anything we have had in ages." "The biscuits are burnt," Hannah said, unable to help herself. "Only a little," Billy said, already reaching for a second one. "And they are still better than the rocks we usually make." Tom nodded in agreement, his mouth too full to speak. Hannah felt a rush of pride despite the meal's flaws. She had done it. She had provided something useful, something needed. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. Over the following weeks, Hannah settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to make coffee and breakfast for the men. After they headed out to work with the cattle, she would tackle the endless chores of keeping a house. She swept and dusted, washed clothes and linens, tended the small vegetable garden that she discovered behind the house, overgrown with weeds but still producing a few hardy plants. She mended torn clothes and patched sheets, learning as she went from a book of household management that she found on a shelf, left behind by Henry's mother. Her cooking improved with practice. The biscuits stopped being burnt. She learned to make a decent stew, to roast meat so it stayed tender, to bake bread that actually rose properly. She made mistakes along the way, plenty of them, but Henry never complained. He would eat whatever she put in front of him with appreciation, often complimenting the things she did well and diplomatically ignoring the things she did not. As the summer wore on, Hannah found herself watching Henry more than she probably should. She noticed the way he was always gentle with the horses, talking to them softly as he worked. She saw how he treated Tom and Billy with respect, never talking down to them despite being their boss. She observed his patience when things went wrong, like when a fence broke and they lost half a day's work rounding up strayed cattle. He would get frustrated, certainly, but he never lost his temper or took it out on anyone else. He was also considerate of her in ways that surprised her. He fixed the broken shutter on the house without being asked. He brought her a rocking chair from town, saying that the house should have a place for sitting that was not just the hard kitchen chairs. When he noticed her struggling to reach the top shelves in the pantry, he built a small step stool. These small kindnesses touched her deeply, making her feel valued in a way she never had before. For his part, Henry seemed to appreciate the changes she had brought to the ranch. The house was clean and welcoming now, with flowers from the garden in vases on the table and curtains that she had washed and mended hanging in the windows. There were hot meals at regular times, fresh bread whenever they wanted it, and coffee that did not taste like mud. More than that, there was life in the house again. Hannah would hum while she worked, and the sound of her moving around the kitchen made the place feel less empty. One evening in late July, Henry came in from work to find Hannah on the porch, sitting in the rocking chair and watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink, the colors reflecting off the distant mountains. He sat down on the porch steps near her, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "Beautiful evening," he said. "It is," Hannah agreed. "I never tire of the sunsets here. They are so big, so dramatic. In town you can see them, but here you feel like you are part of them." Henry nodded. "That is why my father chose this spot. He said he wanted to see God's painting every night." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Over the past weeks, they had developed an easy companionship. They talked during meals, sharing stories of their pasts and their thoughts about the present. Hannah had learned about Henry's childhood on the ranch, his parents' dreams, his own hopes for the future. Henry had learned about her nomadic upbringing, her father's restless nature, her mother's gentle spirit that she missed every day. "Hannah," Henry said suddenly, his voice serious, "I want you to know that you have exceeded every expectation I had. You have transformed this place. It feels like a home again." Hannah felt her cheeks warm with pleasure at the compliment. "I have only done what you hired me to do." "No, you have done far more than that," Henry insisted. "You have brought life back to this ranch. The men are happier. I am happier. And it is not just because the food is better or the house is clean. It is you, your presence, your kindness, the way you care about things." Their eyes met, and Hannah felt something shift between them. The air felt charged, full of possibility. Henry looked like he wanted to say more, but then he seemed to think better of it. He stood up, putting his hat back on. "I should let you enjoy the evening in peace," he said. "Thank you, Hannah, for everything." After he went inside, Hannah sat on the porch for a long time, her heart beating faster than usual. She had been trying not to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing in her heart, telling herself it was just gratitude, just appreciation for his kindness. But she could not lie to herself anymore. She was falling in love with Henry Jameson. The realization terrified her. She was his employee, dependent on him for her livelihood. What if he did not feel the same way? What if she had misread the warmth in his eyes, the lingering looks, the small gestures of care? She could ruin everything by letting her feelings show. She resolved to be more careful, to keep her heart guarded. But love, Hannah was learning, was not something that could be controlled or contained. It grew despite her best efforts to suppress it, fed by every kindness Henry showed her, every smile he gave her, every moment they spent together. She found herself looking for excuses to be near him, lingering over breakfast conversations, volunteering to help with small tasks outside even though they were not part of her duties. August brought scorching heat and a drought that worried everyone. The creek that ran through the ranch property slowed to a trickle, and the grass in the grazing areas turned brown and brittle. Henry spent long days moving the cattle to different areas, searching for what little good grazing remained. He would come in exhausted and dusty, and Hannah would have cool water waiting for him, along with the best meal she could manage from their dwindling supplies. One particularly hot afternoon, Hannah was in the kitchen trying to decide what to make for supper when she heard a commotion outside. She rushed to the window and saw Henry and Tom supporting Billy between them, the young man's face pale and his shirt soaked with blood. Hannah ran outside. "What happened?" "Bull got him," Henry said grimly. "Gored him in the shoulder. Tom, help me get him inside." They carried Billy into the house and laid him on the kitchen table, which Hannah had just scrubbed clean that morning. She did not think about the blood that would stain the wood. She just sprang into action, boiling water and gathering clean cloths, helping Henry remove Billy's shirt to expose the wound. It was ugly, a deep puncture wound that was bleeding freely. Hannah had never dealt with anything like this before, but she did not let herself panic. She followed Henry's instructions, helping him clean the wound and pack it with cloth to stop the bleeding. Billy was conscious but in terrible pain, gritting his teeth and occasionally crying out when they had to manipulate the injury. "We need to get the doctor," Tom said. "No time," Henry said. "It will take 3 hours to town and 3 hours back, and he needs stitches now, or he will lose too much blood. I have done it before on animals. I will have to do it now." Hannah watched in amazed respect as Henry carefully stitched the wound closed with the confidence of long practice. His hands were steady and sure, even though she could see the concern in his eyes. When it was done, they bandaged Billy's shoulder and moved him to the settee in the parlor, which was closer than carrying him upstairs. "Stay with him," Henry told Hannah. "Keep the wound clean and watch for fever. I will finish the evening chores and check on him later." Hannah spent the night dozing in a chair next to Billy, waking frequently to check on him and give him water when he asked for it. By morning, his color was better and he was resting more easily. Henry came in at dawn, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looking like he had not slept at all. "How is he?" he asked quietly. "Better, I think," Hannah said. "No fever yet." Henry knelt down next to Billy, checking the bandage and feeling his forehead. Then he stood and looked at Hannah with such warmth that it made her breath catch. "You were amazing yesterday," he said softly. "You did not panic, you did not faint, you just did what needed to be done. Thank you. I only helped. You were the one who saved him." "We did it together," Henry said. "That is what partners do." The word partners hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Hannah wanted to ask what he meant by it, but Billy stirred and groaned, and the moment passed. Billy recovered slowly over the next 2 weeks. Hannah tended to him diligently, changing his bandages and bringing him meals, reading to him from the newspaper when he got bored with lying still. Henry checked on him frequently, clearly feeling responsible for the accident even though everyone assured him it was just bad luck. During this time, Hannah and Henry worked even more closely together. He would come in to check on Billy and end up staying to talk with Hannah, helping her with small chores while they chatted. She learned about his fears for the ranch in this drought year, his worries about having enough feed for the cattle through winter. He learned about her dreams, the small ones like learning to bake a perfect cake, and the larger ones like having a real home someday, a place where she belonged. One evening, as they sat in the parlor with Billy sleeping peacefully on the settee, Henry reached over and took Hannah's hand. It was the first time he had deliberately touched her beyond the accidental brushing of hands while passing dishes at dinner. Her heart hammered in her chest as his thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "Hannah," he said, his voice low and earnest, "these past months with you here, they have been the best I have had since Mary died. You have made me remember what it feels like to look forward to coming home, to want to be in this house instead of avoiding it. I know you came here as an employee, and I do not want to make you uncomfortable, but I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond just appreciation for your work." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Henry, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I am not expecting anything. I just needed you to know. You are so much more to me than just someone who works here. You are—" He paused, searching for words. "You are the light that came back into my life when I thought I would be in darkness forever." Tears sprang to Hannah's eyes, but they were happy tears. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I have been trying to tell myself it was not appropriate, but I cannot help it. You are the best man I have ever known, Henry Jameson. You saved me when I had nothing, and now you have given me everything." Henry smiled, that wonderful smile that transformed his whole face. "Can I court you properly then? I know it might seem strange with you living here and working here, but I want to do this right. I want to take you to town socials and on picnics and all the things that a woman deserves when a man is trying to win her heart." "You already have my heart," Hannah said, feeling bold. "You have had it for weeks now." Henry stood and pulled her gently to her feet. "May I kiss you?" Hannah nodded, her heart racing. Henry cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough and warm against her cheeks, and kissed her softly. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and when they pulled apart, Hannah felt like she was glowing from the inside out. From the settee, Billy made a sound that might have been a laugh. "About time," he mumbled without opening his eyes. "The whole ranch could see you two mooning over each other." Hannah and Henry both laughed, and the tension that had been building for weeks finally broke. They sat back down, but now Henry kept her hand in his, their fingers intertwined, no longer hiding their feelings. The next weeks were the happiest Hannah had ever known. She and Henry courted in the evenings after the work was done, sitting on the porch and talking until the stars came out. He told her more about his life, his marriage to Mary, his grief after her death. He was honest about his feelings, both past and present, and Hannah loved him even more for his openness. She told him about her childhood, about the loneliness of constantly moving, about her father's flaws and virtues, about her fear after his death. Henry listened with such attention and care that she felt truly seen for the first time in her life. He did not judge her for her lack of skills or education. He valued her for who she was, not what she could do. In September, the drought finally broke with a series of thunderstorms that turned the dry creek into a rushing stream and brought the grass back to life. Billy was fully recovered and back to work, embarrassed by all the attention his injury had brought him. The ranch settled back into its rhythms, but everything felt different to Hannah now. She was no longer just an employee grateful for a job. She was a woman in love, building a life with a man she respected and adored. Henry took her to town one Saturday for the harvest social, and Hannah spent the morning getting ready with more care than she had ever taken with her appearance. She only had 2 dresses, but she had carefully mended and cleaned her better one, a blue calico that brought out her eyes. She pinned up her hair the way she had seen ladies in town wear theirs, and tried not to feel self-conscious. When she came downstairs, Henry was waiting in the parlor, dressed in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. His eyes widened when he saw her, and he stood up quickly. "Hannah, you look beautiful." She blushed with pleasure. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." The social was held in the church hall in Bonanza, and Hannah felt nervous as they walked in together. She knew the whole town would see them as a couple and would talk. But Henry kept her hand tucked into his arm, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. They danced together, ate together, and talked with the other ranchers and townspeople. Henry introduced her with pride, making it clear to everyone that she was important to him. Some of the women were cold to her, remembering that she had been desperate and alone just a few months ago. But others were kind, including the doctor's wife, who pulled Hannah aside and said warmly, "I am so glad Henry found you. He has been alone for too long, and you have brought the smile back to his face. Anyone can see how happy he is." As the evening wore on, Hannah relaxed and enjoyed herself. She danced with Henry again and again, feeling like she was floating. When a waltz started, he pulled her close, and they moved together with an ease that came from growing familiarity and deepening love. "I want to marry you, Hannah," Henry said suddenly as they danced. "I know it has not been that long, but I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything. You are everything I need, everything I want. Will you be my wife?" Hannah stopped dancing, right there in the middle of the floor, and stared up at him with shining eyes. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Henry let out a whoop of joy that made everyone turn to look at them. He picked Hannah up and spun her around, not caring who was watching. She said yes. "We are getting married." The hall erupted in applause and congratulations. The pastor came over immediately, smiling broadly, and shook Henry's hand. "Wonderful news. When would you like to have the ceremony?" "As soon as possible," Henry said, looking at Hannah for confirmation. "I have waited long enough for happiness. I do not want to wait any longer." They were married 2 weeks later in the same church, with Tom and Billy standing up for Henry and the doctor's wife standing up for Hannah. It was a simple ceremony, but Hannah thought it was perfect. She wore a new dress that Henry had insisted on buying her, a cream-colored silk that made her feel like a princess. Henry wore his best suit, and he looked at her throughout the ceremony like she was the most precious thing in the world. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Henry kissed her with such tenderness that Hannah felt tears slip down her cheeks. They were tears of joy, of gratitude, of overwhelming love for this man who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, with Tom and Billy and a few close friends from town in attendance. Hannah had spent days preparing food, and she was proud of the spread she had managed. There was roasted beef and potatoes, fresh bread and butter, vegetables from the garden, and a cake that she had practiced making 3 times until she got it right. As the evening wore on and their guests finally left, Henry and Hannah found themselves alone in the house that was now truly theirs. Henry had moved his things to what had been the guest room while Hannah had been living there, giving her his larger room. Now they would share it as husband and wife. Henry took her hand and led her upstairs. "I want you to know," he said softly, "that I will always cherish you. I will always treat you with respect and love. You have given me a second chance at happiness, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift." "You already are," Hannah said. "You have been from the start." Their wedding night was sweet and tender, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Hannah had been nervous, knowing little of what to expect, but Henry was patient and kind, making sure she felt safe and loved. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, she felt a peace she had never known before. She had found her home, not just a place but a person. She was no longer alone or afraid. She was loved. The months that followed were busy and fulfilling. Hannah continued to manage the household, but now it was her home, not just her workplace. She put her own stamp on things, buying new curtains for the parlor with money Henry gave her, planting bulbs in the garden for spring flowers, acquiring chickens so they could have fresh eggs. The ranch prospered with the return of normal weather. The cattle fattened up, and Henry was able to sell several head at a good price that autumn. By Christmas, Hannah suspected she might be pregnant. She waited until she was sure before telling Henry, wanting to be certain. On Christmas morning, she gave him his gift, a pair of knitted socks she had made in a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a tiny knitted baby cap. Henry stared at it for a moment, not understanding. Then his eyes widened and shot to Hannah's face. Are we? Hannah nodded, tears streaming down her face. We are going to have a baby, sometime in the summer, the doctor thinks. Henry let out a cry of joy and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. A baby! We are going to have a baby! Then he pulled back suddenly, his face concerned. Are you all right? Is everything well? Should you be doing less? We need to hire someone to help you. Hannah laughed at his sudden worry. I am fine, perfectly healthy, and we do not need to hire help yet. I am only a few months along. There is plenty of time. But Henry insisted, and by the new year, a young woman from town named Sarah had been hired to help with the heavier household tasks. Hannah appreciated the help, though she felt a little guilty about it, until Henry reminded her that she had earned the right to be cared for. Her pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and spring. Her belly grew round, and she felt the baby move and kick. Henry was endlessly fascinated by it, placing his hand on her belly to feel the movements, talking to the baby through her skin. He was so excited and also terribly nervous, and Hannah knew he was remembering Mary and the tragedy of losing both her and their child. This time will be different, Hannah told him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. I can feel it. Everything will be fine. I cannot lose you, Henry said, his voice rough with emotion. If something went wrong, if I had to choose. Do not think that way, Hannah said firmly. I am strong and the baby is strong. We will both be fine. You have to believe that. When her time came in late July of 1879, labor started in the early morning hours. Henry immediately rode to town for the doctor while Tom stayed with Hannah, holding her hand and trying to keep her calm. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the whole day and into the evening. Henry returned with the doctor and paced outside the bedroom, beside himself with worry as Hannah's cries of pain echoed through the house. Finally, as the sun was setting, a baby's cry rang out. The doctor emerged, tired but smiling. You have a son, Henry, a healthy, strong boy. And your wife did wonderfully. She is tired but fine. Henry rushed into the room. Hannah lay in the bed, pale and exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up at him with a smile that took his breath away. Our son, she said softly. Come meet your son. Henry approached the bed with tears streaming down his face. He looked at the tiny red face of his newborn child and felt his heart expand with a love he had not known was possible. He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for this gift. They named him Jonathan, after Henry's father, and called him Jack. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's eyes and his father's stubbornness. Henry was a devoted father, doting on his son and helping Hannah however he could. The ranch continued to prosper, and they hired another hand to help with the work, so Henry could spend more time with his family. Hannah settled into motherhood with the same determination she had brought to learning household skills. She nursed Jack and cared for him, amazed by how much love she felt for this tiny person she had created. Watching Henry with their son, seeing the gentle way he held him and the wonder in his eyes, made her fall in love with him all over again. Jack grew from an infant to a toddler, learning to walk and talk, bringing joy and chaos to the household in equal measure. By the time he was 2, Hannah was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1882, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Mary, after both Henry's mother and his first wife. Henry had worried that naming their daughter partially after Mary would bother Hannah, but she insisted on it. She was part of your life, part of who you are, Hannah said. I am not threatened by her memory. She helped make you into the man I love. Their daughter had her father's dark hair and her mother's gentle nature. Jack was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. The house was full of noise and life and love, everything Hannah had dreamed of when she was alone and desperate in Bonanza all those years ago. As the years passed, the ranch continued to grow. They expanded the herd, built a new barn, and improved the house. Henry proved to be a savvy businessman as well as a skilled rancher, making smart decisions that ensured their prosperity. Hannah ran the household with capable hands, raising their children and managing the domestic side of the ranch with efficiency. But more than their material success, what mattered to both of them was the love they shared. Henry never stopped being grateful for Hannah, never stopped appreciating her strength and kindness. Hannah never stopped marveling that she had found such a good man, that she had been given a second chance at life when everything had seemed hopeless. In 1885, when Hannah was 27 and Henry was 33, they had another son whom they named Thomas after Tom Rigsby, who had become like family to them. Tom, now graying and slowing down, was deeply honored. He continued to work the ranch, training young Jack in the ways of cattle and horses, passing on his knowledge to the next generation. The children grew up healthy and happy, surrounded by the harsh beauty of the Nevada landscape and the steady love of their parents. Jack was serious and hardworking, already showing signs of becoming a capable rancher like his father. Sarah was sweet and imaginative, with a talent for music that surprised everyone. Young Thomas was adventurous and fearless, always getting into mischief but charming his way out of trouble. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Henry took Hannah to the spot where they had first sat together on the porch, watching the sunset. The children were being watched by Sarah, the young woman who had helped Hannah years ago and now worked as their housekeeper and nanny. "Do you remember the day we met?" Henry asked, holding Hannah's hand as they watched the sky turn gold and pink. "When you were sitting outside the Wells Fargo office crying like your heart was broken." "How could I forget?" Hannah said. "It was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life all at once. I thought I had lost everything, and instead I found everything." "You told me you had no skills," Henry said, turning to look at her. "Do you remember what I said?" Hannah smiled. "You said I had a heart and that was all you needed." "I was right," Henry said softly. "Your heart, your kindness, your strength, those are the things that saved me. I was just existing before you came into my life, going through the motions. You taught me how to live again, how to hope again, how to love again. And you gave me a home," Hannah said, tears gathering in her eyes. "Not just this ranch, but a real home, a place where I belong, where I am valued, where I am loved. You saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself." "Because it was always there," Henry said. "I just recognized it." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a delicate gold locket. "I wanted to give you something to mark this anniversary. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of happiness. I know we will have many more, but I wanted you to have this now." Hannah opened the locket to find tiny portraits inside, one of her and Henry on their wedding day and one of their 3 children. She started to cry in earnest then, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It is perfect," she managed to say. "Everything is perfect." Henry fastened the locket around her neck, then pulled her into his arms. They stood there as the sun sank below the horizon, holding each other as they had so many times before, grateful for the love they had found and the life they had built together. The years continued to pass in a steady rhythm of seasons and growth. Jack grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over more of the ranch operations as Henry slowed down with age. At 21, Jack married a girl from town, a sensible young woman named Emma who reminded Hannah of herself in some ways. They built a small house on the ranch property and started their own family, giving Hannah and Henry grandchildren to spoil. Sarah, true to her creative nature, became a music teacher, giving lessons to children in Bonanza and playing the piano at church services. She married a banker's son and moved to town, but she visited the ranch often, bringing her own children to run through the fields and learn about ranch life. Thomas, the adventurous youngest child, left home at 18 to see more of the world. He wrote long letters about his travels, working as a ranch hand in different states, seeing the ocean for the first time, experiencing things his parents never had. Hannah worried about him, but Henry reminded her that young men needed to find their own way. Thomas always came home for Christmas, bringing stories and gifts and assurances that he would settle down eventually. Tom Rigsby passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1895, at the age of 70. His funeral was attended by everyone in Bonanza who knew him, and he was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch he had helped build. Henry was deeply affected by the loss of his old friend, but he took comfort in knowing that Tom had lived a good life and had been surrounded by people who loved him. Billy Patterson, the young red-haired cowboy who had been gored by a bull all those years ago, eventually became foreman in Tom's place. He married late, at 35, to a widow with 2 children, and he proved to be a devoted husband and stepfather. He and Henry remained close friends, their bond forged through years of working together and weathering hardships. As Hannah entered her 40s and then her 50s, she sometimes marveled at the life she had built from nothing. She would think back to that desperate girl sitting outside the Wells Fargo office, believing she had no worth, no future, no hope. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the pain she was feeling would lead to joy beyond measure. The ranch continued to prosper under Jack's capable management, with Henry serving as advisor and elder statesman. Hannah spent her days tending her garden, which had become quite famous in the area for its beauty and productivity. She taught her daughters-in-law and granddaughters the household skills she had learned through trial and error, passing on not just knowledge but wisdom about patience and perseverance. In 1898, Thomas finally returned home for good, bringing with him a bride he had met in California. She was a spirited young woman who took to ranch life with enthusiasm, and she and Thomas settled down in a house near Jack's, ready to raise their own family on the land. On a warm evening in June of 1900, Hannah and Henry sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with age, but their love was as strong as ever. 3 generations of Jamesons now lived on the ranch, the children and grandchildren creating a legacy that would continue long after Hannah and Henry were gone. "Do you ever regret it?" Henry asked suddenly. "Taking a chance on a stranger who offered you a job, marrying a man with a broken heart and a struggling ranch?" Hannah looked at him in surprise. "Regret it? Henry, you gave me everything. How could I possibly regret the best decision I ever made?" "You could have had an easier life," Henry mused. "If things had been different, if you had found work in town, met someone else." "Easier does not mean better," Hannah said firmly. "This life, our life together, it has been everything I ever wanted even before I knew I wanted it." "Yes, there have been hard times. The drought years, the times we struggled to make ends meet, the heartbreak of losing people we loved. But there has been so much more joy than sorrow, so much more love than loss." She took his weathered hand in hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "You told me once that I had a heart, and that was all you needed. But what you did not realize was that you gave me a place to use that heart, a family to love, a home to cherish. You gave me purpose and meaning. You gave me everything that matters." Henry raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are the greatest blessing of my life, Hannah Jameson. The day I met you was the day my life truly began again." They sat together as the sun set over the Nevada landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The sounds of their grandchildren playing drifted across the yard, and somewhere inside the house, they could hear their daughters-in-law preparing the evening meal. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. But more than any material success, what they had built was a family rooted in love. Hannah had come to the ranch as a desperate woman with no skills and no hope, and she had become the heart of a thriving household. Henry had been a lonely widower going through the motions of life, and he had found the courage to love again, to build again, to hope again. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear in the vast Nevada sky, Hannah and Henry remained on the porch, content in each other's presence. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. They had raised children and welcomed grandchildren. They had turned a struggling ranch into a prosperous enterprise and a sad house into a joyful home. Their love story had started with tears and desperation, with a kind offer and a leap of faith. It had grown through patience and understanding, through shared work and mutual respect. And it had bloomed into something beautiful and enduring, a love that had not just survived but thrived through all the challenges life had thrown at them. Inside the house, the family was gathering for supper. Jack called out to them that the food was ready. Hannah and Henry stood slowly, their bodies not as quick as they once were, but their spirits still strong. Henry offered Hannah his arm, and she took it with a smile, the same smile she had given him on their wedding day all those years ago. As they walked inside together, surrounded by the warmth and noise of their family, Hannah felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She had started with nothing, believing herself worthless, and had ended up with everything that mattered. Not because of skills or talents or advantages, but because one good man had seen the truth that she could not see herself, that she had a heart full of love and strength, and that was the most valuable thing of all. The evening meal was joyful and chaotic, with children interrupting and grandchildren demanding attention and stories being shared and laughter echoing off the walls. Hannah looked around the table at the faces of her family, each one precious to her, each one part of the legacy she and Henry had built together. After supper, when the dishes were cleared and the children were being put to bed, Hannah and Henry retired to their room. It was the same room where Hannah had first slept when she came to the ranch, though it had been transformed over the years with their shared life. There were photographs on the walls now, capturing moments from their years together, their wedding day, the children as babies, family gatherings and celebrations. As they prepared for bed, Henry paused to look at a photograph from their 10th anniversary, the day he had given Hannah the locket. "We have been blessed," he said softly. "We have," Hannah agreed, coming to stand beside him. "More than I ever thought possible." Henry turned to her, his expression serious. "Hannah, I need you to know something. I need you to understand what you have meant to me. When Mary died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never feel anything but grief and emptiness. I was wrong. You showed me that the heart has an infinite capacity for love, that you can honor the past while still building a future. You saved me, just as much as I like to think I saved you." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, Henry could still move her with his words, still make her feel cherished and valued. "We saved each other," she said. "That is what love does. It takes two broken people and helps them become whole. They climbed into bed, and Hannah settled into her favorite position, her head on Henry's shoulder, his arm around her. It was how they had slept for over 20 years, and she never tired of the comfort and security she felt there. "I love you, Hannah," Henry whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Hannah replied, "always and forever." They drifted off to sleep surrounded by the sounds of their family and the knowledge that they had built something lasting, something meaningful. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations, but more importantly, the love they had shared would echo through their children and grandchildren, a legacy more valuable than land or cattle or money. The years ahead would bring more changes, more joys and sorrows, as life always does. But Hannah and Henry would face them together, as they had faced everything since that fateful day in Bonanza, when a desperate woman and a lonely rancher had found each other. They had proven that love could bloom in the harshest soil, that hope could grow from despair, and that sometimes the greatest skills a person could have were not learned abilities but qualities of the heart: kindness, courage, and the capacity to love. Their story was one of redemption and second chances, of seeing worth where others saw only lack, of building something beautiful from broken pieces. It was a testament to the power of compassion and the strength that comes from facing life's challenges with someone you love by your side. As the years turned into decades, Hannah and Henry grew old together on the ranch, watching their family expand and thrive. They saw grandchildren become adults and great-grandchildren be born. They witnessed the turn of the century and the changes it brought, some welcome and some unsettling, but through it all, their love remained constant. When visitors to the ranch asked Hannah about her life, about how she had come to be the matriarch of such a large and prosperous family, she would smile and tell them about a day long ago when she had been at her lowest point, crying on a bench in town, believing she had no value to offer the world. And she would tell them about a rancher with a kind heart who had seen past her lack of skills to the person underneath, who had given her a chance when she desperately needed one. "He told me I had a heart, and that was all he needed," she would say. "And it turned out that was all I needed too. A heart to love with, and someone worthy of that love. Everything else we built together." It was a simple story, really, but it held all the truth of their lives. That love can transform, that kindness matters, and that sometimes the best things in life come not from what we can do, but from who we are willing to become for the people we love. As Hannah and Henry entered their final years together, they often reflected on the journey they had taken. From that desperate beginning to the peaceful contentment of old age surrounded by family, they had lived a life full of meaning and purpose. They had worked hard, loved deeply, and left a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. On a spring morning in 1905, as new life bloomed across the ranch and the next generation prepared to take over its management, Hannah and Henry sat once more on their beloved porch. The view was the same as it had always been: the wide Nevada sky, the distant mountains, the land they had worked and loved for so many years. "No regrets?" Henry asked, echoing a question he had asked many times before. "Not a single one," Hannah replied, squeezing his hand. "Only gratitude." They sat in peaceful silence, content in each other's presence, grateful for every day they had been given together. Their love story had begun with tears and desperation, but it had become something beautiful and enduring, a testament to the power of kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative nature of love. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light over the ranch and the family that Hannah and Henry had built together. Inside the house, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren went about their lives, carrying forward the values and love that Hannah and Henry had instilled in them. The ranch would continue, generation after generation, but at its heart would always be the story of a desperate woman and a compassionate rancher who had found each other and built something lasting. Hannah leaned her head on Henry's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the warmth of his presence. This was home, she thought. Not the house or the land, but this feeling of being loved and valued and cherished. This was what she had been searching for all those years ago, though she had not known it. And this was what she had found with Henry, a man who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Henry asked. "For everything," Hannah replied. "For seeing me, for believing in me, for loving me." "Thank you," Henry said in return, "for letting me, for giving me a second chance at happiness, for filling my life with love again." They remained on the porch, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and had built a life together that exceeded anything either of them could have imagined. Their story was one of hope and redemption, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is the possibility of transformation, of finding love where we least expect it, of becoming more than we thought we could be. As the morning wore on, their family began to gather, drawn by the simple pleasure of being together on such a beautiful day. Children ran and played, adults talked and laughed, and at the center of it all sat Hannah and Henry, the foundation upon which this entire family had been built. They watched their descendants with pride and joy, knowing that their love had created all of this, that their commitment to each other had given life to something much larger than themselves. In the end, Hannah's story was not about what she could do, but about who she was and who she had the capacity to become. Her heart, which she had thought insufficient, had been the very thing that mattered most. It had the strength to love fiercely, to forgive freely, to hope persistently. And Henry's recognition of that, his willingness to value her heart above any skill or talent, had been the catalyst that allowed both of them to thrive. Their love story, which began with tears on a dusty street in Bonanza, Nevada, in the summer of 1878, had blossomed into a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a story worth telling, a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin at our lowest points, and that love, real love, sees beyond surface abilities to the essential worth of a person's soul. As the sun reached its zenith and the family gathered for the midday meal, Hannah and Henry made their way inside, moving slowly but together, as they had done for more than 25 years. Their hands were clasped, their steps matched, their hearts as intertwined as they had been since that day when a rancher told a desperate woman that her heart was all he needed. And it had been enough, more than enough. It had been everything.